Picked the wrong week to quit sniffing glue.
And bam, just like that, it's Friday again. It's time for another fun week of working with Aztek Dummy. Yay! But we are back on our little journey for the weekend. And we're going to finish this Brakiri ship. There's no two ways about it. And I've picked out something else that was also happened to be needing the same color of green. And while I was at it. So let me cut some video that was done earlier in the week. Actually, it was done last night, so not that much earlier. And then we'll jump back to the present. So get ready for the way back. Here comes. Greetings, it is Thursday night. It seems to be that when I'm going to work on things through the week, it's usually not till about Thursday that I get a chance to do it. So what I'm doing is doing a little bit of pre-painting so that I can finish the Brakiri ship up this weekend. And what I've done is I've taken another one of these, what I call texture patterns. This one's a finer weave, if you want to use that term. It's a finer, smaller shapes closer together. And I just went over it one last time to kind of break up the surface yet again, more so than the big shapes would allow. Plus you get to see some smaller defined stuff. And then I went over the whole kit and caboodle shebang with a nice light blending coat, and that was a little bit of the darker material that I started with in the first place, which is the deep green, because I was afraid it was getting a little bit too bright. So I just did a deep green over the whole thing to kind of mute everything down into the background. So now it is ready for a final clear coat, and then I can put the stripes and the windows in place. Hey, remember this guy? Yeah, he has been sitting in his pupil stage for quite a while. And I swore I was done with figures for a while, and I was going to do nothing but starships. Well, since I finished one little green guy with Yoda, I decided to get another little green guy out. Actually, it's a happy accident that this uses the same green as the Brakiri ship. So while I had it out and while the brush was working, and before I had to clean the airbrush out again, I decided to pull out Mr. Christopher Johnson and put a coat of green on the green parts. And I'll work on him off and on as I am doing the rest of this. But having garnered enough skills and knowledge and learning what not to screw up from doing both Yoda and the Garthok, I thought it was time I pulled this guy off the mothballs and started working on him a bit. But most of my weekend's work will be on the Brakiri ship. Okay, here is the top template, the top piece in place for what is that top yellow stripe. Obviously you're seeing the other side of it. What I'm going to do now that I've got this in place is I think I'm going to cut the back of it off so that I can paint around the back of the back of this fin. I believe that stripe is supposed to go all the way around. It does not stop. I mean, there's yellow on this edge in that place. So I'm going to cut this. It'll also help me line up the one that's on the opposite side so I know that they meet in the middle like they're supposed to. Here's a little handy tool I've found for squaring this stuff up, because this has got so many weird angles on it, and I want to make sure that the windows and stripes are perpendicular or straight up and down or level or plumb or whatever you want to call it. Take the straight edge of the front of the fin, and then I lay, see if you can scroll under, zoom under there, and I'm laying the windows. I just pick a point because I know that the windows are all perpendicular to this or they're all at right angles to the outside bounding box. What I can do is then line up this with the edge, and I should be able to make a come on, focus. Should be able to make a determination whether or not the windows are there. See, it's lined up with that edge, and those windows are on the edge of the material. You know, consequently, I can just do this too. Line the edge of the template up, and then I know that that's square. Same thing with the top and bottom of that stripe. I've laid it on the fin so that I can gauge its squaritude. And I'll just tape off the perimeter. Okay, here you can see I've got the window templates all done on one side. I've got the stripe templates top and bottom. I've had to cut the back of the templates off of the stripes to make sure that they match up on both sides. Now this little thing here I think is my fault, and it's something you may want to be on the lookout for. The stripe here may not be uniformly thick, and I think that's what's happening here. So in order to not have the paint go over top of that, I'm going to put an additional mask over that, just that dark green edge, and while I'm doing the perimeter taping, so that stray overspray does not go there. Okay, all the window masks are on, and I'm ready to tape off the outer perimeters of them. The nice thing about having these big shapes is you can kind of eyeball them to make sure that they are symmetrical, or they are mirrored properly, they're in the right place. Now this would be tough even if you had used the decals to gauge whether or not these group of windows are in the same relative position as these group of windows on the other side. But by seeing the big blocks, which you know are the same size, that gives you something better to train your eye on to make sure that the windows are relatively in the same position. So I got those two little stripes to go on the front of the engine, or the front of the guns, and then we can tape off the perimeters and finally spray some paint. Okay, looks like the best way to handle these ones, these two decals for the guns, is going to be to place them on the center of the decal, on the center of the gun, and then cut it top and bottom, and just wrap those lines around. I don't know how, since I never got a set of the decals, I don't know how the decals handled it any better, since it is a compound curve of a contour of wrapping around plus dipping in here plus wrapping around. So my guess is that the decal would have had to have been cut as well. So let me cut this across here and across there, and then we'll just wrap it with the scrap. Okay, this is one side masked off and ready for paint. This thing is going to be cumbersome as all get out to try to handle, so I don't think I can mask tape off both sides at the same time. I'm going to have to do this side, spray it, take the tape back off of it, leave the templates on, but take the tape off, flip it around and do the other side. It's just too much it's not friendly to try to do this all at the same time. So let me mix up some white paint. Actually, not a lot of mixing, you just take the white paint out of the jar, but do some white on this. And what that's going to do is it's going to paint the windows, obviously, but it's also going to give me a nice undercoat for the white, or for the yellow, to make that really pop. So let me put some white paint on it. Okay, here you go. We've got white on the windows. We've got yellow, white, and then yellow on the top stripe, on the middle stripe, and on the bottom two stripes. And I am going to let them sit for a couple seconds and then remove the yellow painter's tape. And here you see I've sprayed some of the individual windows black, and I have put the template down for the big 6G figure there, and have sprayed black over it. So I'll give these things a chance to dry and then take the templates off. Okay, this is my last video for the evening. It's late Saturday night, and I just took the masks off because I didn't want to leave them on the ship overnight. Outside of a bit of touch-up, everything looks great. I got a little bit of overspray on the front leading edge of that fin, which I could easily touch up. But there, see, I painted some of the windows black, didn't paint them all in white, and everything is looking fine. That painted G6 looks wonderful. The stripes on the bottom look good. Might do a touch of work on the stripes on the weapons pods there, but other than that, I think everything is good. Now, tomorrow I need to put the guns on and do some, like I say, some final weathering. Maybe put some streaks in there, some black scorching or whatnot. But mostly done. So that means I've got room on the desktop for something else. Well, good morning. It's Saturday. I just got off the across the pond chat with some good mates and blokes of the amazing plastics community. If you are cruising the internet and you want a fun place to hang out with a bunch of like-minded modelers, that's the place to go. But here we are, Saturday morning, and I'm down to the touch-up stage and the gun stage. Whoa, almost fell over. That's why I don't like this base. I need to put it on a bigger base. But you can see I've got but you can see I've got all the windows plugged in, and some of them are black, some of them are white, and I've got the stripes painted. And I'm going to do touch-up work. Of course, in the middle of all this rough handling, I did a boo-boo on one of those connections, so I have to sand it. I put some putty on it and re-glued it, but now I have to sand it down and touch up the paint on it. And like any other endeavor, there's usually some cleanup afterwards. So that's what I'm going to do, and then I'm going to work on the guns. Now, I had thought about rebuilding those from scratch elements, but if I can find them here they are on this table. I think I am going to go with the stock kits. I was able to open up the space in between those, and that's what I was afraid I was going to end up snapping when I cleaned them out. So I figured I'd try first, and if I couldn't, then I would rebuild them out of stock. But they go right here. So what I'm going to do is finish cleaning those up, get a coat of primer on them, and then some gunmetal. Okay, what I'm doing here is just to add some very subtle, because that yellow is a big area of yellow, and I'm just breaking it up with a little bit. So I mixed a little bit of white in with the yellow, and I'm making a little bit of a paneling effect on the yellow stripes so that they don't look so big and bulky. Now, it's a very subtle effect. You may not even see it here on camera, but when the light hits it, you can see that there are various shades of that yellow. And welcome back to the gun show. All I've got to do is attach those on here, and then ship will be done. I did all the little patching, little touching and preening and touching up and all those little fancy terms for fixing paint mistakes and things where you screwed up. I put some scorching on there because, every ship I do is it has to be in some sort of a battle, but not too much. So where are we? We are not happy with this stand. It is sitting all kinds of cattywampus on it. So what I'm going to do is go out to the hobby shop and try to find a bigger base. I don't like this. I like the effect that's going on there, but it's too small of a base for this ship, and I think I need to get a beefier rod to go up through here. So I'm going to go and do that. But first, before I do that, I'm going to attach these guns. And the guns are on, and the troubling thing, or the tough thing, was to keep them, since it's basically a flat butt joint, is to make sure that they are not only at the right angle this way, but they are also the right angle this way, and they look good from all sides. I've got them slightly slanted in on this axis, slightly like that, just to screw it around a little bit. But they're on, they're drying. I'm going to hit the bit here with a little bit of chrome silver to highlight them. But I'm going to leave this ship alone for a few minutes and maybe go out and get some lunch and come back and hit it with the final flat coats and work on the new base for it. Okay, here it is out in the full sunlight. And you can get that idea of the mottling effect and the painted windows and the sounds of nature all abounding. So it's actually quite a beautiful day out today. It is not overly hot like it has been, so I'm going to let this sit outside and kind of cure in nature and go run and get base materials. There's probably the beauty angle. If you were to have such a thing on this ship, that would probably be it. I was looking through, since the Brakiri ship is more or less finished, and I was getting back to working on Christopher Johnson. I was looking for some texture, well, texture templates isn't the best term for them. Something I bought at Wonderfest a few years ago that were, I think they use them on painting dinosaurs, to tell you the truth. They are flexible, really thin, I think they're basswood, if I'm not mistaken. Really thin, though. They may even be plastic. Organic shaped stencils that I could use to get some of the more organic mottling on Christopher Johnson. I was looking for those, and you look for things that you've misplaced over the years, and you sometimes run across something else that you forgot that you had, or that you knew that you had, but you had forgotten that you knew that you had it, if that makes any sense. So while I was running around looking for these templates, I made a discovery, and here it is. It is quite literally a discovery. I started this years ago. I bought this from Federation Models. It is about 48 inches long when it's all said and done. This is the steel rod that goes through the spine of it to give you an idea of the scope. But I started it, and there's something inaccurate about the some of the pods, so I stopped working on it. Basically what happens is that the back of those long pods should have the sloped piece like the front of them do, and that never got corrected as far as I know. But so I kind of put it aside and forgot about it, or left it go. But now I'm thinking of taking it back up and finishing it up. Now you can see that some parts of it I did go ahead and work on. I've got the AE35 unit going there, and I've got some work done on some of the spine pieces. You can see I started working on those. But since the Brakiri is well done, and Yoda's well done, and this is partially done, maybe I thought I would resurrect this guy, because the cleaning and the building part of the kit is what I really like doing. And as far as painting, please forgive me, Scott. I know you've made a career out of making these models, the subject, but the painting isn't the most challenging thing about it. It's a lot of grays and stripes, and so once I get this together and get it primed, it should be fairly, I'm not going to say simple to paint, but fairly easy to paint. I can make some circle templates and whatnot for that. So I think this is going to be my next grand experiment, or my next victim, and I'm going to put Christopher Johnson on the back burner, because I said earlier that I was getting away from figures and back into ships, and what better ship than this iconic ship from 2001. So now I need to run to the hobby shop and get some supplies to make this happen. Okay, working on the Brakiri base the rebasement. That's the size of the original, which as I've said, it looks nice, but it's kind of undersized for the rest of the kit, and I think it is, well, I drilled the whole square or wonky on it to begin with, so I'm going to replace it. And what I'm replacing it with is your typical bought at Walmart particle board bases. But I think by staggering the two of them off center like that, and yes, I whined about the brass pole, and I went out and replaced it with a slightly larger aluminum pole. And you'd think, well, it's a difference that makes no difference. But what I'm going to do is fill it with epoxy, which will, as it cures, will strengthen it and make it solid. I priced out solid brass rod and solid aluminum rod, and the fact that I would have to cut it to length, and that just meant too much hassle. So I'm going to use this regular rod and just fill it with epoxy, at least as best I can. And that will strengthen it. But first I need to drill a hole square this time. Square, perpendicular, and flat. And you almost need a drill press to do something like that, but I'm going to try without it and see how well it works. And then get ready to epoxy that to the top of the pole. I have to re-drill that hole slightly larger because this is slightly larger than that. And that will give me also a chance to kind of reroute the drill bit into a better perpendicular orientation. Okay, here is the new Brakiri base. As you can see, it's just two rosettes stacked on top of each other at a off-center look with a wooden rod. Solid wood. I decided not to go with the metal, only because I can paint all of these at the same time, and I don't have to worry about the wood taking the metal taking the paint any differently than the wood. So I'm going to slap a coat of primer on this bottom part and on the stick, and then we'll paint the mother black. Okay, it's been a spine-tingling adventure, but I've got all of the spine parts or modules done. Now, they've not been primed or anything. They've simply been constructed, and they're loosely sitting on this plastic tube. This is how I'm going to spray bomb them. There's a lot of little nooks and crannies in there, so they're going to have to be painted individually, I believe, or at least primed. And then what I'm going to do is leave them a heavy dark gray, and then I'm going to mist them with a white, and that should give me the tones of gray that I want. As you can see, the module for the antenna array, and then this is, imagine this being the back of the ship up to the antenna array, and then picking up here and going up to the neck, which is this piece. That is all the neck that goes into the back of the big old dome on the front. And I think that's going to be my next goal, but I'm not going to use epoxy, or I'm not going to use CA with this. It's going to work too fast. I think I'm going to use the 1 minute epoxy on this to get these two halves together. I can still work. What I'm concerned about are those window frames. I think I'm going to rip them out and reinstall some, and I can still work on that from the inside once this is all set up. And I think I'm going to do some little cardboard folded cockpit, since there is no cockpit in the kit. Just some sort of backing thing. I'm not going to try to lighting this or anything fancy, so I just need to make some indication of something in there. Okay, this is a big, important, squeaky bum time joint to make, and fortunately it is really tight and really good. What I'm going to do is, and I'm afraid if I do too much it's going to scoosh out, so I'm going to run a thin bead of 1 minute epoxy in here, and then smush the two pieces together and hold them for a few seconds and see how that goes. Okay, the end of the day snuck up on me real quick. I got lost in rapturous model building, which is always nice, and completely lost track of time. So this is where we're going to leave it for tonight. We've got the spine drying, with all the glue drying. We've got the two halves of the dome epoxied together, and it's setting up. This is just sitting on top. It's not been glued in or anything. And that's going to cure overnight. And we'll pick this up tomorrow. So then, sweet dreams. Yes, it's Sunday morning, and I'm being a bad boy. I'm playing hooky from church today. And yeah, it's one of those weekends where I just got out a bunch of stuff and started working on it. The Brakiri ship is mostly done. I ended up replacing that wooden dowel with the aluminum piece that I bought, because the wooden dowel was too short. I didn't measure it. I just stuck it on there and hoped that it wasn't paying attention. And when I put the ship on top of it, the ship was too close to the base. So that's why I changed it. And then I got out this Discovery kit. And while I was working on that, I looked at these Shaun and Ed busts that I got at Wonderfest, and I started playing with those. So yeah, I've been very productive this weekend, but it's been very non-focused. I got the whole spine laid out for the Discovery. This is the command module, has come back from being overnight curing, and the top and bottom are now very much one piece. But I was surprised how quickly the Ed and Shaun busts were coming together, and I just kept going with that. And it's not great modeling, but you know, it's not great project management, but it was pretty good modeling, and I just decided to go where the workflow was taking me. I'm modeling them on these, I believe these are Diamond Select figures, action figures that I picked up quite a few years ago. I've lost the pedigree on what the actual figures came from, but I'm using the paint cues from it because they're very, very close. I'm not going to bloody these up nearly as much, but I am going to, like I say, use those as my paint models. And it's going very well. I'm playing with the flesh painting, and of course they've got no eyes in them yet, so I am going to take my time on that. Those will probably go back and sit for a while, who knows. But what I want to do today is get a primer coat on all of the spine parts for the Discovery, and that includes up to the back of this neck. The ball is not attached to this piece at this point. What I want to do is get that whole spine laid out, and I've done nothing with this back piece, so that's to come. But I want to get the primer in and out of all these little nooks and crannies and fiddly bits. So that's the next job. But really, I couldn't do that last night because it means setting it outside on a nice rack, and I didn't want to do that overnight. So I picked up other stuff that I could work on at night. But these are coming along quite nicely. I think the sculpt on them is just amazing. I like a good caricature because a caricature you can forgive some of the I'm going to paint it with more cartoony colors that plays into the nature of the caricature. It's not going to be completely 100% accurate like you were painting an actual portrait, and that gives you some artistic license to play with colors and things like that there. Okay, I believe I've wrestled Shaun and Ed to a point where I am ready to stop working on them for a while. You may think dealing with zombies is tough, but it's nothing compared to the sheer horror of trying to paint eyes, which is why I'm putting off painting the eyes on these as long as possible. I'm in a bit of a quandary as far as how much of this stuff I should clean up, because the sculpture is what it is. It's a very rough, in some points it's very rough, and like the sculpt to the back of the ears is very rough. Should I smooth that down? No, because that's part of the sculpt. But obviously I want to get rid of any mold lines and creases and things like that. But beyond that, I'm not going to try to clean up like this detail that's in the back of this neck around the collar, because frankly that's how it was sculpted. So that's where I'm at. Do I clean that up or do I leave it be? But I think those two gentlemen are looking very fine, and I am going to go out now and do some priming on the spinal parts of the Discovery. Okay, just because I couldn't stand not piecing it all together for one shot for the weekend. Everything seems to fit. There's your command module, and all the way down the spine. Now none of this is glued down. I just wanted to make sure that I had enough metal rods sticking out, and this has not been epoxied in, but now I'm going to do that knowing that the rods and the steel rods in the right place, so I can go ahead and epoxy that down and cover that up and put the engines on the back, and then I can start spacing these out and tacking them down with super glue. And I'll put the antenna on there. I've got it built, I just don't have it on there. But yeah, these are all just laying in place. I know I've got the right modules in the right spot, or in the right order. And then I got to figure out something to do with the base. And you ask yourself, where are you going to put something large like this? Well, I've got this space above my doorway here that is just one long run, and I can certainly make a shelf and put it there, because that does take up a goodly amount of space. About the only other place I could think of would be to run it above those, between those two cases at the top, that might be the more attractive venue. So we'll have to see which one wins out. But now I'm going to hoist this thing outside again and put another coat of primer on, or prime the parts that I didn't prime the first time. Well, just in case you thought I forgot about it, this is the final Brakiri ship on the new base. I got a fingerprint there that I need to buff out, but beyond that, I think it turned out very nice. And this base, to me, now, of course, it's a lot more, it's shaking, but it's a lot more stable now than it was on that other pole. And I can do a little bit of adjusting there before I glue it, but it's a lot more balanced, I think. It just doesn't have that popsicle look or sucker look where it was a big head on a tiny base. This base is equal to the importance of the ship on it. You can see where, look at that. It looks like a 6. It looks like it could be a G. I don't know what it's supposed to be. But one step above the decals in that you can choose to light some windows and not light some others. And you can see the guns are on. Everybody's happy with those. And well done. Well done. And it goes with the other Babylon 5 ships that I've done. That's that Thunderbird or the Star Fury. I can't remember what they called that thing. Forgive me. I turn in my geek credit. But there's that's the old monogram Starfighter kit. And that was an aftermarket Shadow ship that I did in maybe half an hour it took me to make that ship, because all I did was clean up the parts, prime them, and then paint them with this wonderful black textured hammered paint. Turned out wonderfully. And there's an old White Star ship. That was probably one of the first resin kits I ever built. But now I have a new addition, and somewhere on my stash I have a Narn ship that was way complicated. It has lots of brass parts to it as well as the resin, so maybe I'll be brave enough to pull that out of mothballs. But that's the finished Brakiri ship. And there's a whole lot of discovery going on here. I just threw some primer on it. I'm going to pull it back in the house now and set the back end into some epoxy putty. So get that set up. But while it was still kind of wet, I wanted to leave it out here. Now I'll move it in on the dining room table. And that's going to do it for one more week. I think I have adopted the mantra of Hydra as my modeling motto. You finish one model, you start 2 more. I don't know what got into me for starting the other 2 kits. I just had that kind of a weekend, but Brakiri ship done. So now we're into the discovery phase, and that's going to be fun. Not a lot. I never considered it a horribly complicated thing to paint, but there are a lot of subtleties that I never gave it credit for. So I'm going to be investigating as many of those as possible. Getting the guts of it together was the important thing for this weekend, though. And getting the Simon Pegg, getting the Shaun and the Ed figures or busts done, or at least as far as I got. That was just, I don't know what. I just went, oh, there's a left turn, I think I'll take it. And I just started on them, and next thing you know, they're next to done. So I'll continue on those. But that's how the modeling goes sometimes. You plan to do something and you zig when you should zag. So until next week, when I'll be zagging when I should be zigging, and I'll come back and we'll get into phase 2 of the discovery build. Until then, have a good week, and I will see you next time. Bye-bye.
I'm completely operational and all my circuits are functioning perfectly.